And and I was a biochemistry and cell biology major. So I was in the biology department there. And when I graduated, I had been planning on going to medical school, but my mother got very sick and passed away while I was in college. And so I decided that I never wanted to go in a hospital again. And so I ended up going to work first in public health for a year because I speak fluent Spanish. I worked in a vaccine program to recruit Latino parents to have their child in a vaccination program. And then I worked at a biotech. And in those days, the hot new field was DNA. And so I worked at Strategy, which did cloning kits. And I worked in their technical services to help troubleshoot experiments for researchers. And it was through that people were like, oh, you should be a teacher, like almost every day. And so I ended up going for my master's at San Diego State in chemistry, but I had to fill in some prereqs because I had come from a biological sciences biochem. And I really enjoyed my master's degree. It was very much that small classroom feel. I will say, though, that back then I was only one of 2 women in the entire building. And so that could be something later I'll address, very different than now, which is great, but also presented some challenges. And then I started working here at Mesa when I was very young. And so I've been here for 28 years full-time, 30 years part-time. And I completed my doctorate in education as I worked here at Mesa. So I just love community college teaching, especially in my area.
I guess if we're going by age, I must be next. Hi, I'm Dr. Brahmbhatt in the biology department, for those of you that don't know me. I went to UCLA as an undergrad in microbiology and molecular genetics. My mother is a microbiologist. She's actually in the room here with us, Mrs. Gauker. And she's probably the one that influenced me the most. It was either that or engineering, which is what my dad did, but interested in both. And so I basically worked with bacterial genetics. I had an opportunity to do some research as an undergrad, even do an internship. I went to graduate school at Loyola University of Chicago, and looks like Paula and I have something in common. Mine was cell and molecular biochemistry. I think the two really go hand in hand, so that was an easy match. And so being in Chicago was fun to get away, but also gave me an opportunity to kind of delve more into research. I worked a lot with both my graduate work and post-grad work with cancer cells at different levels. We worked with a process called signal transduction, where we look at how cells communicate and how that might be different with cancer cells versus normal cells. So I got to watch cells move. I got to watch them metastasize in a sort of an artificial environment and look at the molecules that are involved in that process, how they may differ in one cell or another. So that was kind of cool. So Loyola University of Chicago for my PhD, and then I came back to California for my postdoctoral work at the Scripps Research Institute, where I continued my work with cancer. I wanted to get back to sunny California. And I think my thread throughout all of this was also teaching. I didn't realize it until much later, but I guess I had always been seeking out opportunities to teach. I was first tutoring as an undergrad, and then in grad school, seeking opportunities to teach and tutor. And then even when I was a postdoc, I was always the one helping out undergrads that would come into the lab and do summer projects, but then also looking for opportunities to teach. And so I think I was drawn to that. So when I was introduced to the idea of a community college, that seemed like the right fit for me, because while I love the science and the research, I think I wanted a more balanced lifestyle where I could help individuals. I could teach them what I knew, maybe learn myself. We're lifelong learners. And then have time for my future family. When I first started at Mesa, my youngest was a newborn. She was 6 months old when I started. So it's been a crazy journey since then, but lots and lots of fun.
Okay, I'll go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Waverly. I teach geography. And as an undergrad, I went to Virginia Tech. I double majored in geography and geology. I just like the G words. Everything was like right together in the catalog. And then I took a couple of years off, moved to Santa Barbara. I lived there, and then worked in Yellowstone for a summer before I started a graduate program in geography at Texas State University, which is an HSI in Texas between San Antonio and Austin. And I had an NSF funded research where I helped scientists who are trying to collaborate internationally to teach about important global issues like climate change or water resources. Because the NSF sort of recognized the issues of today need international perspectives and different voices at the table. And then they reapplied for the second level of funding for that grant and got rejected, I guess, 4 years, but they kept reapplying. And then finally, when they got it, they offered me to come back for the PhD internship. So I also did my PhD at Texas State. I really think it's a lesson, and the same thing happened. Another grant I'm working on right now with colleagues at San Diego State. They were rejected so many times, and just reminds me, like, the most successful people I know are the ones that have failed the most. But they learn from those mistakes and like keep going. And I'm just really impressed with the tenacity that my colleagues have. And then as a PhD student, I had a fellowship at National Geographic. And then I started teaching at the community college level, I guess maybe 15, 16 years ago. And so, I'm really happy. I think community college is where it's at. So thanks for having me.
I can go next. Hi, I'm Dr. Daniela Bruckman. I teach biology at Mesa. Let's see, my academic career, I suppose, began at UC Santa Cruz, which is where I did my undergraduate. Took me a while to find STEM. I was actually an art history major for a while. Eventually, I found biology, and I was really sort of inspired by the natural surroundings of UC Santa Cruz. It's such a beautiful place to live. So anyway, I took the plunge. I thought doing biology would be really hard because of all the calculus and the physics and all that stuff, but it wasn't so bad. And I did really well. I took 3 years off between undergrad and grad school. I took advantage of that time to participate in some field research. I should say that my specialty as an undergrad was in ecology and evolutionary biology. So my background is quite different from the other biologists and people who have already talked. So I did a lot of field work. I was very interested in plant ecology. I got some experience in the field in my 3-year break doing a little bit of everything. I studied macaws in the Amazon basin. I studied hummingbirds in the cloud forests of Costa Rica. I studied bat parasites in the wetlands of the Pantanal in the interior of Brazil. So I got to do a lot of really cool stuff. I actually got a husband out of one of those. And in Brazil, I ended up importing one of the people I met doing research out there. And we're still married and we have a couple of kids. So that's, I guess, kind of a fun part of my academic journey. Let's see, I began grad school at UC Irvine, continued on in my ecological biology avenue. And I studied the effects of invasive plants on the pollination of native plants. So I was looking at how invasive plants essentially compete for the attention of pollinators in our local Orange County coastal communities. I also looked at some of the direct effects of heterospecific pollen transfer, which is basically just a fancy way of saying, what does the invasive pollen do on the stigmas or the reproductive parts of native plants? Does it affect their seed set, for example? So grad school was kind of good and bad. I have to say that like grad school wasn't always a pleasant experience. And I think that when I finished it, I was happy to be done with it. Although there were some aspects of it that were wonderful, like getting my feet wet with teaching. Being out in the field was definitely awesome. And then I was actually introduced to the community college world when I did an internship, a teaching internship through what's called the California Community College Internship Program. And so I started working as an adjunct actually my last year of grad school, and I just kind of stuck with it. And it was a great introduction to what would ultimately be a wonderful career. So I'm happy to be here now. And I still am very passionate about conserving our native habitats. And as Daniela knows, we've started to work a little bit together. We haven't gotten too far yet, but I've been trying to incorporate research and research methods and just sort of conservation in general into the Mesa world. So there's my elevator talk for you.
Perfect. Thank you all for that. So we're going to move into some of the questions. I did want to mention that all of the questions that we're going to talk about today did come from the club. So with that being said, the first one we're going to go with is, what has been your experience being a researcher / a professor? I think everyone's done both, and balancing motherhood in the STEM field.
I can speak to that. So I had my first son actually before grad school. So when I started grad school, I had a 1-year-old son. And so I have had to balance motherhood and academia for pretty much the whole time. I would say it's one of the most challenging parts of being a woman in STEM for those women who decide to go that route and have kids. Not everybody does, right? And it's something that, biologically, men are parents, but being pregnant and nursing and all of that is, usually a part of, motherhood. And so it can be really challenging. I was lucky in that my mother-in-law, who's from Brazil, was able to help out so much. I oftentimes say that I kind of dedicate my PhD to her, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been able to do everything that I did. I had my second son the last year of my PhD program. So when I was writing my PhD, I don't know why I did this. But yeah, it was pretty crazy. So I'd be pumping and in my car, because I was an adjunct. I was writing my dissertation and I was the mother of a newborn. So that was really tough. And somehow I did it, again, with the help of my mother-in-law. So having support is really key. What else can I say about that? Just knowing how to balance your life and be able to make space for both family and your job definitely takes some practice. It's a skill that I think all of us in one way or another need to learn how to hone. And I'd say, I guess I'm a little bit younger, and so the support systems in most academic institutions have only gotten better. When I was an adjunct, there were not any kind of special places to pump or to nurse. And I think that has come a long way in just, the last 5, 6, 7 years that I've been teaching as an adjunct. So that's great. I'd say, for those of us who are maybe a little older or didn't have those kinds of resources, it must have been much more challenging, but these days it's getting better. I think that's mostly what I want to say about that. Just having the support system there. And it's a privilege. I mean, I really need to say that it's clearly a privilege to be able to do motherhood and maintain a full-time job. And so that should definitely not go without saying, right? It's something that not everybody is able to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I second everything you said, because I had my full-time job here at Mesa, and I was working on my doctorate in education. And then I had my 2 kids during that process, and it was really difficult and very tiring. But I also had help from family. I had my cousin from Chile came And so she lived with me for several years, and that definitely helped. I think relying on family was really important. And I do think if I look back, I probably should have taken a little bit more time off. And so with the younger women in my department, I always try to say to them, hey, it's okay to take a sick day. It's okay to say, you know what, I'm exhausted and I need a little bit of a break, because that's my regret, trying to finish up that doctorate with 2 kids and working full time was really rough. And I probably should have taken a little bit more time off. And I think it's okay, because you try to be kind of superwoman and not show that you're under so much stress. And I think that finding a support group with other women at work can really help. Back then there weren't so many, right? But I think now that's really what I try to say to our younger faculty is, take some time for yourself.
I don't have kids, so I'm gonna punt this over to Anar. Yeah.
So I definitely feel the same way that Paula and Daniela. It's really been a blessing to have children. I finished getting my PhD and my postdoctoral work before teaching. And so, but right at the start of teaching is when I had them. And I guess these are not things that you really plan. But if it's what you want, if that's in the cards for you, then, you just kind of go for it. And again, I think, as both of them said, the support system is really huge. My mom and dad were there to help. My husband's always been very supportive. And honestly, I felt like the minute I stepped into Mesa, that's where I got a lot of support as well, from all different levels of administration, and of course my department has always been really wonderful. So yeah, I came in not having any special lactation room and this sort of stuff. So all of that was ultra challenging. But I had a lot of people kind of trying to help and find solutions for that sort of thing. I kind of push myself a lot, but I always got the impression from my colleagues that if I needed the time, I could take it. It was definitely a rough time. I was probably super sleep deprived. I hope I made sense when I was lecturing in front of the classroom. I think I did. I'm still here. But that was 17 years ago. And so that was definitely a different time. I was able to take off time for maternity leave with my second daughter, and again, got a lot of support from all levels at Mesa to take the appropriate amount of time off and come back when I wanted. And yeah, Paula, just like you said, I really try to talk to a lot of the younger faculty here that are just in the middle of doing that right now, to say it's okay, you don't need to rush back. Take the time that you need. That's a part of the package, really, and we're all here to support you. So you can have both. You can have your cake and eat it too. I think certainly being in community college and teaching here has been the place where I felt more that. Again, I did my graduate work, before having children. So that was a busy time as well. And I don't know if there's a good way to do things or a right time. It sounds like everyone's kind of found their own way, but I think when you find what you're looking for, and if motherhood is a part of that picture, then you make it happen. And I think being real about it is very important, not just with your colleagues in your professional life, but also with your family. I think my children see me maybe sometimes running around with my head cut off, trying to do all these things, but happy, super happy with where my life is right now. And to them, that's normal. I learned that from my mom, who did the same. She just went after the things she wanted. So she was busy, but she had time for us. And it's that constant balance, that constant, ebb and flow. And so nothing seems out of the ordinary for me. I always got the impression from my family, my support system, that I could do anything and there was no reason why I couldn't accomplish it. So that's sort of how I manage things. And yeah, again, my daughters are almost off to college now. So I don't know how that happens, but I see them kind of modeling a lot of the same things I did. So let's see what their chapter looks like here.
I would like to add one more thing, like a practical piece of advice, because I am more of a field biologist. I would say for those of you who are younger, if, thinking about family in the future, like I would say, while you don't have kids, do all of the things that you wouldn't be able to do when you do have kids. So for me, like I said earlier, like I went to the Amazon, I went to Brazil, I went to Costa Rica, and I got all of this really cool, exciting, adventurous field work done when I was young. And then when I went to grad school, I already had a kid. And so I had to kind of like keep it local, right? So take advantage of your freedom and independence while you have it, if you have it, to go do some of those more adventurous things if you can. So.
Perfect. Thank you all for that wisdom. The next question we're going to go with is, since STEM fields are so male dominated, how can we as women in STEM be taken seriously?
I think a lot of that is being prepared and knowing your stuff. I think that, I was in a time when there weren't very many women at all. And so I feel kind of study harder, work harder, and always be very professional in how I presented myself to my male colleagues and fellow students. And so it's like they're going to respect you and they're going to listen to you if you know what you're talking about, and you have to present that aura of confidence and work really hard to project that. Because I think even in situations where you wouldn't have thought it, because I was sort of like, hi, I'm Paula, I'm here, they did take me seriously because I always was prepared for whatever task they were presenting, even if I had to behind the scenes work really hard to be at that point. So I didn't let them see me sweat, basically, and I just try to walk in and own those situations and project confidence and intelligence. And because of that, it was pretty rare that it wasn't well received. I think the worst thing you can do is go in and be floundering, because perhaps they might pick on you a little bit more. Because they might say, oh, it's because you're this or that, but you just have to go in with confidence and preparation.
Yeah, I definitely think like that fake it till you make it is like a key thing. But then I think it also breeds like imposter syndrome. Have you all talked about that in the club, right? Where you feel like, oh, like you don't belong. So I think to cope with that, just like talking with other people and realizing like, oh, like I am prepared. I do belong here. There is a space for me here. And like hearing other people tell you that is really, I think, helpful. Quite a bit. And I think, yeah, it's sort of weird, and I don't think this is a good thing, but you kind of build thick skin, right? I think number one is people in science, right? Your research has to be criticized. And even though it's not ever like a personal thing, when you're getting critiqued, you can't separate yourself from the sort of culture in which we live in. Right. So I think building that thick skin is really important. And this is the thing that I think is weird. I think I just put blinders on a lot of time and just sort of like, I like what I'm learning. I'm going to keep doing it. And I'm not really going to pay attention to this other thing, like all the haters or whatever, I'm just going to ignore that. But I don't think that's a healthy way. Like, I wish the structure wasn't like that. I don't know if anyone else here sort of relates to that, but yeah, putting in the work is like the number one thing. But also that's kind of weird. I mean, everyone should put in the work, but I guess, yeah, there's still like even today, yeah, like a expectation surrounding gender. Yeah.
Yeah, Waverly, definitely. I agree with you and Paula, what you've said about being professional. And again, that thick skin, yeah, for better or for worse, that's definitely been a part of the process. I mean, I think that at your core, if we want to sort of change how things are, it's just continue to believe in yourself, believe in your abilities, and behave that way, rather than worrying about how others may perceive you. Like, be true to yourself. Sometimes that's going to steer you the right way. surround yourself with other individuals that are like-minded. That's another way to do it, whether they're, what doesn't matter what their gender is, right? It's really about just like-minded individuals, and that will help to propel you forward, to help to boost you when maybe times are a little bit tough. And yes, the idea of working hard, again, it shouldn't be put into this category, but yeah, absolutely. Whatever your goal is, it's going to take hard work. And so are you going to be singled out for being a woman, or where there'll be bias? Maybe, probably. But at the same time, if you're working hard, you're moving forward, you're achieving your goals, you have this job to do, right? Whatever it is you decide to get into. And then I would say that seek out opportunities to be heard in research that involves presenting at a research conference. Those are things that we actually have opportunities for all of you to do here, even at Mesa, so you can get your feet wet there. But even early on in the classroom, make sure you're heard, ask your questions. Don't worry about being wrong. Don't worry about the fact that you're still learning. That's we're all learners still. And I think the other thing is that leadership opportunities. Thank you, Paula. And I would say that this one's probably a hard one. I've seen other women in STEM kind of shy away from this, but don't just go along with something because maybe you feel that you should keep quiet. And there's a way to do it. You don't have to necessarily punch someone that says the wrong thing, but I worked with an advisor that was a white male, and he tended to hire, I didn't realize this until after the fact, but tended to hire technicians, lab support that were all Asian female. And I was one of them. Again, I didn't realize it till the time, but he made a point of coming into the room and making a lot of inappropriate racist jokes about Asian females, and everybody laughed because he was the boss and we didn't want to upset him. And I just couldn't. So I just, I'm not a very vocal person. I probably did want to punch him, but I just made sure I kept quiet and did my work and let him know by my facial expressions that wasn't funny. And that little bit of victory just, helped a long way. I don't think I was one of his favorites for it, but I was true to myself. I didn't just go along with it. So there are little things you can do. And, in the end, I think begrudgingly, he respected me for that. So there are things you can do. That would be the advice that I give. You don't have to be pigeonholed into you're a woman in STEM and that's it for you. I'll have more to say at the end about that. A lot of amazing women have done things and they haven't let any of that stand in their way. And many of us have too. So we wouldn't give you that advice. Just don't let anything stop you.
I think everything was mostly said by the people who spoke before me, but there's one thing I kind of want to mention, and that's, I guess I'd like to push back a little bit on the concept that all STEM is male dominated, because I'm observing, and I always have observed, at least in my field of ecology and evolutionary biology, it's pretty female dominated. And I mean, I'm not sure what to make of that. I just want to maybe push back on the idea that every STEM field is male dominated. I know that engineering tends to be pretty male dominated, but I want to maybe communicate that it's not always going to be challenging, that when I was a grad student, my advisor was female. I had a lot of really strong, inspiring women around me. I did not experience too much sexism in academia. And I think that in general, we're kind of in a place where things are better than they've ever been for women. So I think that could at least set us at ease a little bit and look around knowing that we are not in the same place that we were even just a decade ago or 2 decades ago. So I think it's worth recognizing that.
Yeah, those are some great different perspectives. Thank you for that. So as far as concerning your education and teaching experiences, grad school, all of that, what would you do differently now that you know what you know and you've had all the experiences?
I'm happy to start here. I think that the decision to go to grad school is a really big one. and that people don't necessarily decide to go to grad school for the right reasons. I was one of them. I sort of was always a really good student. I loved when I officially decided to be a biologist as an undergrad. I was really good at my classes. I learned information really well. I was good at taking tests, and I thought that that's what being a biologist meant. And then when I graduated, I was like, okay, now what? Well, I thought to myself, well, I'm a good student, so I'm just going to keep doing school. So I was like, I'll apply to graduates programs. And I didn't really realize what it meant to be a grad student once I started grad school at UC Irvine. I thought it was going to be more learning, more test taking, like more of what I've already done. And the reality is that it's nothing like that. When you're in grad school, you are hired as a scientist, and you are expected to produce work like a scientist. And I wasn't prepared for that. It was really intimidating for me. Also, when you start grad school, you go from, being an undergrad and learning about all these really broad things, and can be, learning about the natural world for me was really exciting. Like, oh, let's learn about plants, let's learn about animals, let's learn about ecology and this, all that. That was really exciting. And then when I started grad school, your scope just goes from really broad to incredibly narrow. And that can be kind of jarring, because now you're like, I'm going to study this one species and this one system in this one place for 5 years. And people are going to just expect me to know how to design an experiment and analyze my data and communicate my findings and sit in seminars where everyone's incredibly brainy and everyone's a genius, and you're supposed to say something really intellectually stimulating and it's really intimidating. So I would say, especially for when you graduate from the undergrad world and you're thinking about what to do from there, really do your research, really be sure about what program you want to go into. Make sure that you're really interested in the topic that you're about to study, because it's a long road and it's really challenging, and the people around you are going to make you feel stupid because everyone's a genius. When you go from undergrad to grad school, you're just surrounded by professors and researchers all the time and other really smart grad students, and that whole imposter syndrome thing takes over. So I would say, if I could go back, I would have spent a little bit more time thinking about what graduate program I wanted to get into, what exactly I wanted to study, and not just kind of use grad school as the default option.
I don't think I really have regrets but I will tell you this, that perhaps don't be afraid to take different risks, because there's a lot of jobs and opportunities out there in STEM, especially if you have great communication skills that you don't even know about. So, I went from a biochemistry, then I worked in public health, like I said, then I went into biotech, and in biotech, there's all sorts of careers for people who enjoy science, from research, but there's also, what I did was technical services, there's marketing, there's sales, project managers, and they all involve communication of science. And then I went back for the chemistry, like I told you. And I think, especially now, the world is so much more interdisciplinary than it was before, that so many different overlaps between our fields. And just don't be afraid to take risks. And like Danica said, try research on, see if you like it, but then don't get discouraged, because there are a lot of opportunities for people who can communicate well. And so develop your soft skills. I think they're very, very important. And I know now everything is pushing towards online. That's a whole other discussion, but we still have to have communication skills, and they're very much, my daughter's also biochemist, and she works in biotech, and she's now in management, and she says that that's what they look for, are people that can communicate. And so I didn't know if that really answered the question. I don't think it did, but I don't have regrets, but don't be afraid to take risks and maybe to regret a job or two. It's okay.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I definitely, what Daniela said about kind of going down this rabbit hole and looking at some very specific part of what you do. That was a little bit, I don't know if surprising is the right word, but I liked the broadness of the scope I got in undergrad, and definitely in graduate school, you have those opportunities when you get to hear what other people do, what research they do, or potentially you collaborate. I've always loved research. I knew I was getting into that part. I had an opportunity as an undergrad to do research, as Danica said. That's really a great idea. And so I think that at the time I thought that that's what I really wanted. There is a little part of me that still misses that. For me, it was more on the personal side. Again, I loved the research part. I love the science. That's what makes me tick. So I was always going to go down this route. But I think it was the personalities that I encountered. And I'm a stronger person than I was back then, but it was hard to encounter individuals that were rough or maybe were manipulative, not collaborating, even though on the surface you were supposed to collaborate. I think a lot of that, I had this dream notion of what it was going to be like to do research. And so I think my advice, I don't call it a regret, because I really feel that things happen for a reason. I think all the way up to today, being able to talk with all of you. But I'm in my dream job. I love what I do. So I feel as if I had to go through that entire path to get here. I don't regret any of that. But I do think that I could have maybe spent more time trying to figure out which was the right place for me when I was in graduate school, which was the right lab environment. We get an opportunity to do rotations, and somehow I chose wrong, the rotation that I was in. And I say that, I don't say that lightly. I, in the end, loved my actual project, but the advisor I worked for was very difficult to work with. I don't know if maybe I would have smelled that out. Now I think I would, but back then that was tough. So I think really taking the time, number one, when you're in that environment, whether it's undergrad and trying to find the right fit for an internship, or in graduate school doing rotations, do more detective work. I guess that's what I would say. Talk to other individuals about their experiences with that person whose lab you're thinking about joining, or what the environment in that lab is like, not just your principal investigator, but also the other graduate students or the postdoc that's there. What is that environment like? I think that threw me for a loop. I had a very, Disney version of what I thought that was going to be like. So I wouldn't change anything either. No regrets. I think I'm who I am. I think I'm able to give a lot to my students and give a lot to this career because of those positive and negative experiences. So I think you have to, when you're given lemons, make lemonade, sort of thing.
I don't think I have anything as sort of deep to say. I think for me, looking back, I felt like 90% of grad school was coping skills, because there were people that like never finished their dissertation that were like better prepared, better skilled than me, but they just didn't have the coping skills to like have all this pressure of a dissertation on them. So I don't know what would I do differently? Maybe be more intentional on building those coping skills, or maybe being able to communicate with like friends and loved ones, like, listen, I'm doing grad school, like our relationship is going to suffer. It's not because I don't love you. It's because I'm like super hyper focused on a goal right now. And maybe because I think like I have friends through grad school that I have, today, but then they sort of were able to forgive me for like not showing up when they might have needed me because I was too focused on my studies. And so I think, maybe just like communicating with people about like how it's like the short-term pain for a long-term gain for like what I'm going for. But I don't know if that's helpful or not though.
We've definitely touched on this with the other questions, but I think this is a good segue for what would your advice be for young or, women going into research or grad school at this time?
I'll just share real quick what I did before I decided what programs to apply for. I went to like the academic geographers association where like 7,000 geographers like get together to present research. And so all of your fields will have that. And so I got to go and like hear the professors, meet graduate students, and kind of do that detective work, right? To say, oh, like, is that professor actually available, you know, for their students, or does that professor have funding? That's what I was really trying to do. I did not want to pay for grad school. And so I ended up going to a school where I got in-state tuition, and it was like really cheap. Like my whole PhD was like $15,000. Which I think is inexpensive, but maybe it's not, I don't know. Yeah, so kind of like networking, I guess, is the answer, networking.
I guess I'll go. So as far as, I know I looked at the question in advance, as far as research in grad school, again, I think a lot of this was said, but basically get those opportunities beforehand if you can. Look into research opportunities, look into field work if that's what you're interested in. Speak to a lot of people that are in the fields that you're interested in. Find out what they do, whether they like what they're doing. I think that's really an important thing to do. And then, I know Daniela talked quite a bit, Dr. Bruckman talked a lot a bit about kind of what that pathway looks like if you're in research, like really know from end to end what it looks like. What if you're going to go into research, like hardcore research, you're going to be writing papers and grants. It's going to be a lot of work inside a lab, or if you're in a field like hers, you're going to be out in the field. Is that what you like? Is that what you really, really want to do? And again, the best way is to maybe do an internship. With getting something like a PhD, I know in biology, it's not 4 years. There's no such thing anymore, unfortunately. So it's more like 5 or 6 years minimum. So know what you're getting into, be okay with that. Again, as Waverly said, yeah, it's going to be a hard road. It's temporary, but like anything in your life, do things that are worth it. So, be okay with that and know, I guess, that knowledge of what you're going to have is the most important thing. What are you going to do after that? Are you going to do postdoctoral work? Are you going to start up your own lab? Are you going to be a PI? What does that look like? That's not an easy road either. Or are you going to get into something like biotech? Or are you going to, go some of the other routes that Paula suggested? And I know there's many, many other careers, but yes, with fields like Waverly's, with biology as well, you can get tuition paid for. Mine was a free ride, or I got stipend and all of those sorts of things. So those things are out there, search for that. That can ease some of the pain, I suppose. And then again, I'll go back to the rotation thing. If you do research, think about the lab that you want to get into. Really quickly, I found out early on that I didn't want to work at the organismal level, because sometimes that meant sacrificing animals. I do work with cells. I look under microscopes. I look at molecules. I was really interested in neuroscience and fetal alcohol syndrome, only to find that in that rotation, that meant sacrificing mice and looking at their brains. Obviously a very important thing, a very important branch of research, but I found, and I'm not squeamish, but it was not something that I wanted to do. So again, just keep your eyes open, be looking at all of these sorts of things, and ask lots of questions, and really be true to yourself. Okay.
I also think it's important to recognize like what it actually means to be a scientist, and what you actually spend your time doing. Because since I teach organismal bio and I tell these stories about like studying hummingbirds and macaws and stuff, like I would say about 90% of your time is writing. You're asking for money, so you're writing grants, and then you're writing manuscripts. And I think that was kind of jarring for me too. I was like, what? I don't get to roll around with panda bears all day long? Like, what are you talking about? So you're really in, like Anar said, you're in a lab, you're asking for money, you're asking for grants, and then you're writing manuscripts, or you're reading manuscripts, or you're reviewing manuscripts. So it's a lot of writing. So maybe one thing that some good advice would be is get your writing skills honed, and maybe take a scientific writing class, because oh man, I remember I wrote like my first thing and my PI was like, what is this? She like red marks all through. It was definitely, an experience to get that kind of initial feedback on your writing. So learn how to write if you want to go into science. It's going to be really useful.
I wanted to jump in and just say one thing here. And I know we all feel this, but you know, research can be so amazing. I hope that you're not getting the sense that it's an awful place to be. I know we've all chosen to teach. I would say again, you know, eyes wide open. And then if you know that it's going to be tough, once you know that this is the path, these are the things I'm going to do, you know, carve out time for yourself as you go through this. You know, there are stages even in the trenches where you can go out with friends, you know, get a life, get a husband, right? Go get yourself a husband. I did the same thing in grad school, right? So whatever it is you want, I'm, you know, just kind of coming up with a bunch of different things. Make time for the things that you love, that you're passionate about. There's no reason why you can't do both. There might be times where you have to tip that balance and you're focusing on your, you know, dissertation and you can't go out as much with friends, but then you're going to get to celebrate with them, right? So it's kind of go back and forth. So no reason why you can't. And again, these amazing discoveries, these amazing, you know, the amazing progress we've had in STEM is because of individuals that have decided to go those routes. So there's no reason why you shouldn't. I know that none of us are saying that, but we have our reasons why we're in teaching. Just understand what that all entails and then go for it. No, Daniela, you weren't. I think we all kind of were just like, yeah, it's there's the pros and the cons, right? So kind of weigh them both. No, you're great.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think like it's like at the end of the day, it's like what a privilege it is to like ask a question and like try to answer it. You know, like how amazing is that? And yeah, it's like never a dull moment. You're like, you know, it's not like, yeah, it's just like it's a great career. But it's not easy, right? But it's worth it. Yeah, I think so.
We have about 10 minutes left. So kind of to build on that, I wanted to just ask like what your favorite part of being part of the women in STEM community is and like how that works into your job.
I'll just say real quick, like I am a really curious person and I love being around curious people. It's the best, right? Other people that share a passion for learning, that like I can talk like even like passion for teaching, like I can talk about those things just for fun, you know, so the fact that I get to do it for work is really great.
I agree with that. I think that this job is awesome because we get to learn for a living. And I mean, all of you who are in this club are in it because you probably are super invested in your education. And so whether you decide to go into research or into teaching or some other academic or scientific career, it's really nice that you get to fulfill that curiosity. Like Waverly said, like I have an insatiable appetite for knowledge. And it's so fun that I get to use that appetite and satisfy myself while I get to make a difference in the lives of my college students and hopefully, you know, in some small way, the world at large, right? By just kind of like giving people knowledge and inspiring them to pursue education.
I really enjoy being around college students because it's very uplifting to see people at the beginning of their journey and thinking about where they want to be. And I find that it's very inspirational to see students that have overcome a lot to be here and still working towards a goal. And I also really enjoy, and I say this as truthful, I really love nerds and I love my science nerds that I hang out with. There's a certain sense of humor that they have, certain outlook on life, silly things that maybe the general population would think we were crazy, but I think find your inner nerd and find those that have those interests, you know, and it can be really magical. Like I have so many of my friends and family that are like, so jealous of the work community and the community I have with students. They're just like, wow, my job's not like that. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. I'm grateful every day to be around the people that I work with and students because it's just fun. I just love science nerds. What can I say?
Yeah, I would say exactly what everyone else said. It's really my dream job. I love teaching. I feel the same way. I'm learning as I go. My students teach me things with the questions that they ask, with, you know, what they explore. I feel like I have wonderful colleagues. This is an amazing opportunity just to get to talk to everyone today and share ideas, share thoughts. And then, yes, I feel like it's the perfect balance. I love being a mom and I love being a professor. And I actually, very short story, I wasn't planning to teach. That was going to be my retirement job. And with the help of my husband and his support and my family, he said, you should go for it now. You shouldn't wait until then. And so this was really something that I didn't think I'd get to do until much, much later, when I could do what I wanted to do, if you will. So it's just so amazing. Every day is something special. And I feel like I get to grow, you know, even now, after being here for so long. If it's okay, I wanted to share a link. I know in the question that was given, one of them was about what's going on right now with women in STEM. And I came across this great link that has like the top 50 women and all the amazing things they're doing in STEM, from the person who discovered telomerase, which is important in things like aging. And of course, it's got the whole spectrum of STEM. So if you're interested in it, I put that link there. I thought it was really inspirational. And, you know, the take home message was like, it has nothing to do with being a woman. It's just amazing people getting to their job and doing what they love doing and making great strides. So I thought I'd leave with that. And again, found that really interesting.
Okay, it's about 6 o'clock. So if there are any questions, now would be a great time for the last couple of minutes. If not, thank you guys so much for being part of our panel. We really appreciate having your all the information that you have and the wisdom that you've gained. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you know, with the nerd, one time it goes back to something that I think Grayson said in the chat. One time in class, I said, oh, you know, I made some stupid nerd joke. And I said, you know, you need to find nerdier friends and just teasing. And then a student came up after class and she was in tears. And she said, you know, just whenever you said that, I found that to be true, because I lost all my friends by coming to college, and they told me that I was too good for them now, and that they were, why did I have to study, that I used to be more fun. And when you said that, I reached out to a group of people here at Mesa, and I never would have done that. And so I think that's it, really a great way of thinking of it. I said it kind of like a joke, but she took it to heart because she had lost all her friends in trying to be a STEM major. People were telling her she was stuck up now and too good for them. And she found her community at Mesa. And I love that you guys are in this club, because this is your community and it's great.
Yeah, I think you said to have nerdier friends in my chemistry class right now. And I think that's a really, like, obviously, you know, it's like joking around and stuff, but I think it's a really interesting thing, because those are the people that understand that, like, you can't hang out because you have to study, or, you know, that you don't have the time for that, as well as they get your like random long conversations about, you know, science related stuff, or the, you know, funny STEM jokes.
So true. Some of my best friends are in this room right now.
I think study tips, yeah, it is really special. I think for study tips, I think it's a matter of studying a little bit every day, staying on top of things, because if you can stay on pace, it's almost like preparing for a running race or something. You have to keep at it and develop your skills. And even if it's just an hour a day or a couple hours every other day, keep your skills up, because then when the quizzes or test rolls around, then you're ready, you know.
just like you wouldn't go run like a 5K without doing anything. You know, you have to prepare. You have to prepare your body. I see studying STEM and as preparing your mind on a daily basis.